Welcome to Sega Dudes, first podcast. I'm a Wazram, and with me is
Master Welch.
we're a couple of Sega fanboys, I guess. I don't know if I'd qualify it as fanboys because I don't play a lot of the new stuff, but Sega retro fanboy.
Enthusiast.
Enthusiast, I like it. I like it.
Yep.
Fanboy too often has a rather negative connotation to it. But we're just going to discuss some of the stuff going on in gaming, not necessarily everything Sega, because there's other stuff outside of the world of Sega. There's some company called Nintendo, and there's this Microsoft company. Somebody said something. This PC company they made a console, and then there's the TV company Sony, or no, the Discman company. Yeah, they're making games now apparently too. Who knew?
Yeah, who knew, man? I mean, I'm into like the CDI and Pioneer. I mean, who thought they'd make games in collaboration with Sega?
Yeah. Yeah, well, I mean, now Sega's making games with everybody.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Well, Sega's just, third-party developer now for consoles, but they still have their first-party franchises.
Yeah, if you think about it, man, that's been over 20 years.
Yeah. It's been
2001?
30.
No, 2001. 22-ish years, 21, 22 years. Because the Dreamcast was released in 99, and it had about a 2-year life, at least here in the States.
Oh, you mean as a party, third party? Yeah.
Yeah. Over a little over 20 years since they've made a console, if you're excluding the Sega Minis.
I wouldn't exclude them. I mean, those have the official Sega stamp on them.
But it's not a console that you can take a cart or a CD and plug it into, unfortunately.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I know a lot of people get into those consoles just for the fact that, ROMs have kind of taken over people's interests, because they're available and online and, they can load those machines up. It's like having your Sega that is saying, "Hey, put ROMs in me."
Look, it's an official release, and you can play whatever games you want once you jailbreak it or sideload stuff or whatever.
Yeah, I don't know. I got all of them, even the Japanese versions of them that came out, and I haven't messed with them at all. I mean, I like the original intention of it all.
Yeah, I haven't hacked the Genesis or the Genesis Mini 2. The only one mini console I did hack was the NES. That one's still sitting in the box. I get out and play it for a little bit, and then it goes back in the box and up on a shelf.
Yeah, and with my Genesis or my Nintendo Minis, I actually just leave them as is because it has the the best of Nintendo's retro on them. So I feel like I don't want to mess with them. I mean, I'm sure if I was a hardcore enthusiast for Nintendo and started looking around at it, I'm sure there's a few titles on them that I would need to put on them. But I mean, as it is, I mean, Metroid, Mario, a Zelda game, and I'm happy.
Yeah, there's plenty of stuff on the minis to be getting along with. So it's not really necessary to hack them, but it's something fun that you can do if you want to be able to have a little device, HDMI device in particular, hook it up to a modern TV, and you can get off and play as little or as many of the games as you want from the library if you hack it.
Yeah. Yeah, and kind of as you're talking about that, I mean, we got that whole thing we were kind of talking about with the price change of the Nintendo. What's that all about?
Yeah, the $70 price point for the new Zelda title.
That's what it was about?
Yeah, I don't. But I mean, what Microsoft has already said that some games are going to be $70, which will also just push people towards getting Game Pass, which I think that's their ultimate goal, is to create that digital ecosystem, because you can play Game Pass on, was it some Samsung TVs or LG TVs? I forget which, but you can put in your information for your Xbox Live account and stream games straight to your TV. You don't need anything else. So I think they're pushing that kind of an ecosystem like Netflix.
Yeah, I was hearing Sony's talking about doing that with their TVs too for PlayStation stuff.
I think as much as we might like to collect, physical games, I think that's kind of the future of it all.
Yeah, it is. And I don't like it.
Yeah. Which, if you have the subscription service like Game Pass, does it really matter that a physical game is going to cost $70 when most people aren't going to pick up a physical edition anymore? Which, I mean, it's already going that way as it is. But I don't know if they charge $70 for the digital versions, then I think people might get more irate.
Yeah, I mean, getting a PS5 games are $70, like Returnal. Returnal was the first game I bought on PS5 that I felt was worthy of a purchase, and it had that big price tag on it, and it was kind of like, a little bit of a shock. You go from 59.99 for years and years, to all of a sudden 69.99, even though in hindsight that's only $10 more. It just seems like a bigger number, but I mean the cost of production for those games, 4K processing, you got to have somebody there to make sure that it processed right. They got to have people designing the stuff that's at large scale. So I mean, to me, I get the price increase. I mean, that's just how it goes. I mean, there's no more cheap game development because the systems have got so complicated.
Yeah, I mean, it's more of a surprise that it's taken this long for games to get there, because if you think back, the Genesis and Super Nintendo, there was a lot of times that particularly RPGs were 60, 70, 80, and I think there were some that were launched at $100 a piece.
Yeah.
So, games costing more than $60, it's not a new thing. It's just I think everyone got used to, the AAA titles that come out, they're at $60.
Yeah.
And like you said, there's so much more that goes into the games now, because the size of them, just, I mean, sizes and how many megabytes are actually, it's gigabytes now that they take up. So all that high texture resolutions and that super crummy lens flare that some people like, all that, it adds up. It takes a bunch of room, and so somebody's got to design it and build it and make it and all that good stuff, and it costs more. The team size has grown a lot for those games, and even towards the end, if it's a large company, they're bringing everyone in to work on that one game towards the end to wrap it up. So the development teams have really grown in size, and yeah, there's just a lot more going into them. But so I mean, I can kind of understand why people don't like the $70 price point, but like I said, to me, it's surprising that it's taken this long, because there was murmurs about it early on in the Xbox One and the PS4 days, and people were just, I guess the companies were hesitant to make that move, and now there's like, nope, it's time.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think the call for, less DLC's been coming into their ear, I think more and more as well. Because I've kind of noticed with some of the newer releases, there is DLC, but it's minimal. It's very optional. So they got to figure out a way to make more off the base game as opposed to like spending more time in developing more content for one game when they should just move on from it.
Yeah, and I mean, if you're actually getting a complete game on the disc or on the cart, I think it's worth the money to get a one and done, and especially if it's like you don't have to worry about day one patches, which that'll probably always be a thing. But as long as you're not getting a ton of DLC, and or the DLC is in the realm of, okay, here's some skins so you can change how characters look, I think that's fine, because then it's not something that you actually have to have to play the game or to continue the story. Horse armor. Everyone loved it when horse armor was a thing. It was like, well, you don't have to buy it.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, I think that's a good good topic that we kind of skimmed over. I definitely think that could lead to more discussions in the future. With
Oh yeah.
past games. All right, yeah, Master Welch back here. You know, kind of thinking a little bit what we were just talking about there with pricing. And you think about the old retro era games. They didn't have the option to do patches, on cartridges and early CD media. And you hear about further revisions, games that had changes. Let's say a copyright thing came up and they had to make changes. A good example of that would be Revenge of Shinobi, the different versions of that, and you got the one that has Rambo in it. It has
And Spider-Man, Godzilla.
Spider-Man, yeah. I wanted to say, wasn't there another character, but I can't think of it right offhand. And I've actually looked for that one, to add to my collection, but it's so hit or miss. I mean, people say, you just got to take a chance and plug it in.
Yeah.
you know, that'd be a hell of a rabbit hole to get into there too.
Oh my goodness, hunting down all the revisions. Because I think even on the Genesis, Michael Jackson's Moonwalker, I think there was a revision release for that one. I don't remember what it was, if it was some of the music or there was one particular song that they didn't have the rights to or something. And so they had to release a second version of it.
Yeah. Yeah, that sounds pretty familiar there. I mean, I'd have to look at the story I'd read on that, but yeah, there is something with Moonwalker. Trying to think of another game right offhand. Like I've been messing around with CDI content, and some of those games when you go and look up information on them, they have different versions. Some will be like version 1, version 2, and not really knowing the issue right offhand, especially with something like CDI. I mean, it might have been a deal where it might have been bad programming. So who knows? There could have been a deal where people were sending in to get copies redone, and it was a different revision. I can think of what was it? Panzer Dragoon Saga had an issue like that. I think it was disc 3 in it. It had a bad disc, so you almost got to figure, would that be considered a revision in the minting process?
Yeah, I think it would be, especially if it was a game-breaking issue. But that definitely leads down a rabbit hole, because you're like, okay, so if you have this version, it's not playable, but maybe it's more rare because they caught it early, and less people held on to their discs because they sent them in or whatever to get replaced, to get one that actually worked. And then, so is that one more rare, or would be the revision be more rare because so few people actually sent it in to get the version that had been patched and updated and whatnot?
Yeah. Yeah, and you think about like today's gaming standard. I mean, they'll ship a broken game and they can just patch it,
Yep. Day one patch. You thought you were going to get to go home and play your game as soon as you could. Oh wait, no, it has to install. It's going to have some updates. Oh wait, and then your console might have some updates too. So, oh wait, you might need to update your controller.
Yeah.
Everything's just, yeah. It's nice being able to just retro console, retro game, plug it in, play it, and you're good to go, and you just enjoy the game. You know, if you only have 10 minutes, you can actually play the game instead of, oh, wait, I've got 10 minutes, I've got 2 hours of downloads. Until they get that cloud gaming and fiber optic internet everywhere, you know, it's going to be a little bit more difficult to get people to switch over to some of that streaming stuff. Just because, I mean, personally, I'd love to get fiber, but it's not available here. So download speeds can be horrendous. I don't know what it is with Xbox. Sometimes it seems like it's just throttled on the Xbox. It's like any game that I download, it's like I'm gonna have to wait till the next day to actually be able to play it. So if I didn't pre-order it, so I could get the you know, you can download it the day before, but you can't play it until, you know, tomorrow. Then you're stuck waiting and waiting and waiting. Nothing but those to the head. All right, we got the Spider-Man fight. Whoa. Whoa. How do you get this off? Oh. Why is he shooting where I'm not? So, Master Welch, being a fellow Sega dude, what was your first experience with Sega gaming?
My first experience with Sega gaming was the Sega Master System, and it was completely blind. You know, all I'd heard about was Nintendo from other students, and Dad was referred from a fellow coworker to get a Sega. So we went shopping at Target, got a Sega Master System right off the shelf, copy of Rambo, took it home, and I remember it was late. You know, that thing got unboxed. It was late. Dad played around with it for a little bit, checked it out, and then he had to go to bed because he worked early in the mornings, and Mom took over on it, and she started playing, and we started learning Rambo that night.
That's pretty cool. It makes me think. At that time, our town didn't even have a Target, let alone find some place that had a Master System. So that's pretty cool.
How about you, man? What was your first experience?
Actually, not including a console, I just was thinking about it. Commodore 64 there were some games on the Commodore 64 that were Sega games. Not Donkey Kong. Congo Bongo. A little bit closer to the arcade version than some of the other ports. And what else? There were some other ones that, I mean, I didn't even realize it until much later on, but I still have the cartridge for Congo Bongo. You can plug it into the back of the Commodore 64. But the first console that I got was the Sega Genesis that came with Sonic the Hedgehog. And like, I don't think I'd even heard of Sega and the Genesis at the time. You know, everything was, like you said, Nintendo, and then all of a sudden there was a Sega Genesis, and man, that was a good Christmas. I created a little video that I put up on my YouTube channel showing how I got it. It was just interesting because, like, I got a game for the Sega Genesis before I got the Genesis, because Dad handed me a game first, and Mom ripped it out of my hands when I started tearing off the wrapping paper, because, you know, you can't spoil the big surprise by giving out the little surprise that goes with the big surprise. But so Sonic the Hedgehog and Desert Strike were my first Sega console experiences. And you know, I don't remember if I played Sonic or Desert Strike first. I don't know if it really matters, because I know I switched back and forth between the two. I do remember that we had it hooked up to an old cabinet TV through the RF connection, because I can remember having to get back there and screw on that little RF connection to the coaxial end so that we could hook it up and play it. And man, it was just great. You turn that on, and the sound and the colors for Sonic, and then Desert Strike, just flying around in that helicopter, still one of my favorite games. So a great game, great memory with Sega, with mom and dad, Christmas time, a lot of fun.
Yep. Yeah, man. I mean, once we got gaming in our household, it was more of I guess like a reward. It wasn't exactly like, oh, I can just turn it on and play it whenever I want. It was like, get your homework done, your chores, then you could play, and you would have to ask.
Yep.
You would have to ask. So, I mean, it was a lot different back then when you think about the experience, because your imagination ran wild with it in those times of when you weren't getting to game. You were
Yep.
like thinking about the next time you could get on there and experience some of the stuff you were seeing and learn more about what you were doing. And yeah, I mean, gaming was a whole different thing back then for my generation, because it was more of like I guess like they like to throw out these notifications on games, play responsibly and stuff like that. I mean, I guess you could call it that.
Yeah, I remember having to do chores and whatnot before I could play. And then there was always the times when you got up early enough that okay, you ate breakfast and then you played some, and then it was like, all right, well, you got to turn it off now because everyone else is up, so you got to go and do this and that with the family, or you got to go and take care of the chores during the day. But yeah, it was always great when you were at night or on the way home or something, you're sitting there thinking about, okay, this is what I did last time and I made it to this point. So if I can repeat that, I'll be able to get to someplace different. Or if you get stuck on a boss or something, you sit there and thinking about, okay, what would the fight go like when you first encountered it? So what do you need to do to change it so you can actually beat the boss? Or, okay, I need to jump before I get to this point because I'm falling in a pit. And I know a topic that we want to discuss at a later date is talking about like the posters and stuff that came in the games and advertisements, because at the time that was all we had to go by. Outside of, you go to the store and you look at the back of the cartridge and you're like, okay, cool, the graphics look nice. I mean, there wasn't really much outside of the magazines to. I mean, we were always judging the book by its cover.
Yep.
So to say, just because that's what we had. And if you didn't have a monthly subscription to a magazine, then it was always up in the air.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, just a little note on that is like, definitely, I can remember just looking at the back of the box and seeing the different screenshots for the games and stuff, and like that immediately got the imagination going. So I felt like, that'll be a good topic to talk about, because the imagination really ran a lot more wild than they do today, because what you're getting.
Yeah. Now you can get online, you can watch 15 reviews and tons of playthroughs before the game's even released, because of people getting early copies, and as long as their NDAs have expired, they can go on and play through it and say whatever they want about it. Hopefully they're actually saying the truth and not just saying what the developer and publisher want them to say, so they can keep getting games.
Yeah.
But yeah, you don't have to use your imagination nearly as much, because you're just like, yep, I know exactly what I'm getting. I watched a full playthrough, or I watched the first 20 minutes of gameplay, so I'm pretty set on knowing what I'm getting here and what I'm getting into. And yeah, it's just totally different world of gaming. But a lot more games to play now, and you really need to pick and choose. So nice that we have the internet and other resources to find out what to actually look forward to, and hope that everyone has someone that they can trust when asking questions about particular games that they may or may not like.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, I think that the game preview era really kind of began with the PlayStation, because they did the demo discs and samplers and things like that. It was, looking back, not actually having a Saturn during the time of the Saturn, they were doing the demos and stuff sporadically in the US. But if you look at like Japan, uh, catalog, there's a lot of that concept going along. Like they did a demo series called like Sega Flash, and that's pretty much your PlayStation Underground disc. But I don't know, man. I mean, it definitely, prior to that, was just all about the imagination. You might have caught a commercial with a little bit of gameplay and like a quick 2 second blip, to some crazy music that had nothing to do with the game and some kind of hype. Other than that, I mean, it was all based on trial and error with people buying it, playing it,
Yep.
going to their house playing it, hearing about it, reading about it in magazines even. But yeah, I mean that's a good take. I mean, I definitely feel like we should focus another segment sometime on what we encountered.
Yeah, it's one thing like I just thought about was comics. Is in the back of comics or in the middle of comics, every once in a while there'd be an advertisement for a game, and so even if you didn't have the magazine subscription, if you or your brother or sibling or whatever had some comics, every once in a while you'd start looking through those, and I think this was more in the 16-bit era, but you'd see again screenshots and a little blurb about the game trying to entice you to buy it. So, and then we could probably do a whole nother segment just talking about manuals.
Oh, yeah.
Because that, once you had the game and you were in the car and you had the manual out, you were just enveloped in that manual, and your imagination was just going with it.